New York State Racing Parimutuel Wagering and Breeding Law, Section 102, provides that the New York State Gaming Commission shall consist of 7 members appointed by the governor by and with the advice and consent of the Senate. 4 members confirmed by the New York State Senate are necessary to afford the Commission an ability to establish a quorum and undertake action. This present meeting of the Commission is now called to order. Ms. Secretary, please call the roll.
John Crotty.
Here.
Peter Machete.
Here.
Don Baklemba.
Here.
Barry Sample.
Here.
Jerry Skurnick.
Here.
Todd Snyder.
Here.
Ms. Secretary, please have the record reflect that a quorum of qualified members is present, thus enabling transaction of business. Chairman Sample.
Minutes of the Commission meeting conducted on July 16, 2018 have been provided to the members in advance. At this time, I'd like to ask members, are there any edits, corrections, or amendments? Any changes to minutes? May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next on the agenda is the Executive Director report. Ron?
Thank you. This afternoon, I'd like to touch on a few thoroughbred and standardbred items and one lottery item. Saratoga Racecourse. The final all-source handle for the 40 days was in excess of $659 million, the second highest ever recorded, despite the number of races taken off the turf. Overall, inclement weather forced 50 turf races to be moved to the dirt, compared to an average of 20 moved each year from 2015 to 2017. This caused a reduction in field size from 8.25 per race for last season to 7.75. Trainer Chad Brown set a Saratoga meet record with 46 victories, breaking his previous record of 40 he set in 2016 and tied by Todd Fletcher in 2017. Irad Ortiz Jr. was the top winning jockey, registering 52 wins. Klarovich Stables was the meet's leading owner with 21 victories. Live racing returned to Belmont Park on September 7th for a 36-day, $10 million meet, which extends through October 28th. The Belmont Fall meet will be highlighted by Super Saturday on September 29th, where the Grade 1 Jockey Club Gold Cup, Grade 1 Joe Hirsch Turf Classic Invitational Stakes, Grade 1 Vosburg Stakes, and the Grade 3 Pilgrim Stakes will be contested. On the standardbred side, the 2018 New York Sire Stakes Night of Champions took place this past Saturday. The Sire Stakes is designed to promote the breeding, buying, and racing of standardbred horses in New York State and is the nation's oldest harness racing program administered by the Agriculture and New York Horse Breeding Development Fund. This year, approximately $14 million in purses and $1 million in breeder awards will be distributed to support and encourage the Agriculture Foundation of the New York Sire Stakes program in the state. The Night of Champion, which provides those horses that have earned enough points to compete in the championship round, consisted of 8 races with a combined purse total of $1.8 million and took place at Yonkers Raceway. The New York Sire Stakes was the first of its kind and we believe still the best. We congratulate those winners from this past weekend. On the lottery side, there's certainly good news for New York. Powerball, which is conducted in 44 states, the District of Columbia, and the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, had just one winner on its August 11th drawing, and it was a New Yorker. The single ticket was worth $245.6 million and was purchased at a Stop and Shop on Staten Island. A press conference with Yolanda Vega will be held this coming Thursday at Resorts World, New York City. The winner has decided to take a lump sum payment of $147.8 million. Ironically, the last $100 million plus winner in New York was also from Staten Island, who won the $169 million Mega Millions jackpot on January 8th, 2016. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. New York State Racing Parimutuel Wagering and Breeding Law authorizes the Commission to promulgate rules and regulations that it deems necessary to carry out its responsibilities. In that regard, the Commission will from time to time promulgate rules and rule amendments pursuant to the New York State Administrative Procedure Act. We have 4 items for consideration this afternoon. Ron, will you please outline the first item?
Blazing Sevens Progressive Wager. For Commission consideration is the adoption of a proposed rule establishing a blackjack table side wager called Blazing Sevens Progressive. The proposed rulemaking, including the text of the proposed rule, was published in the August 8, 2018 State Register. a copy of which is attached. A public comment period for the proposal will expire on October 8, 2018. To date, no comments have been received. In the event comments are received before the close of the comment period, staff will promptly inform each member. As mentioned previous to the rule proposal, Division of Gaming staff evaluated the experience with this game and is satisfied that this wager will be appropriate to add to the table game rule as a permanent rule. Also, please note that the language correction was made to the rule proposed by the Commission. The correction did not substantively alter the proposal. Staff recommends that Commission adopt this proposal rulemaking.
Commissioners, any questions on the adoption of a rule for Blazing Sevens progressive side wager for blackjack, subject to not receiving substantive comments before the close of the comment period? Any discussion? May I have a motion for the proposed rule?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Ron?
Self-exclusion. For Commission consideration are proposed consolidated and amended regulations for self-exclusion from gaming activities. While the Commission previously authorized a version of these rules last year, staff wishes to expand the proposal to include certain lottery play and supersede the previously proposed rule. To refresh your recollection, the various forms of gaming in the state operate under different self-exclusion rules. Commission staff has sought to centralize self-exclusion policy to make self-exclusion universal rather than limit self-exclusion individually to each form of gambling. The proposal would require that a person file a request for self-exclusion and select a length of exclusion. A self-excluded person would be prohibited from collecting gambling winnings or recovering any gambling losses that occurred during the exclusion period and would be subject to possible arrest for trespass if found on the premises of a place from which the person is excluded. Among other requirements, all gaming operators will be required to establish procedures and training for their employees to identify and manage any self-excluded person found to be present on a gaming floor or participating in gambling-related activity. Self-exclusion program elements are found in regulations for thoroughbred wagering, standardbred wagering, quarter horse wagering, off-track betting, video lottery gaming, and commercial casino gambling. The proposal before you would consolidate all, including lottery, into a single location. Following current rules allowing for voluntary self-imposed restrictions that count wagering. These existing standards would be consolidated in a new Part 5403, eliminating duplicative provisions currently in the thoroughbred, standardbred, quarter horse, and off-track betting rules. Staff recommends that the Commission authorize the reproposal of this rulemaking.
Commissioners, are there any questions on the reproposal of a rule regarding self-exclusion? Any questions? Any discussion? May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Ron?
Claiming purse structure and thoroughbred. For Commission consideration, the proposal to add flexibility to the thoroughbred claiming price rule in appropriate circumstances. The current rule provides that the minimum price for which a horse may be entered in a claiming race shall not be less than 50% of the value of the purse for the race. The rule was adopted in 2012 when the increase in claiming race purses at Aqueduct Raceway seemingly caused an increase in racehorse fatalities. The rule reduced the incentive of an owner or trainer to enter a potentially lame or uncompetitive horse in such a race. Various interested parties have requested the Commission to consider adding flexibility to the existing rule, identifying neighboring jurisdictions who have experienced safe racing with higher purse to claiming price ratios. The proposed rule would provide flexibility by permitting on a case-by-case basis for all or a portion of a race meeting, while requiring the track to meet increased requirements to ensure the competitive soundness and safety of the horses that enter any such race. Staff recommends the Commission authorize the proposal of this rulemaking.
Any questions on the proposal of a rule regarding claiming purses structure in thoroughbred racing? Any questions?
I know Dr. Palmer was kind enough to come today. Maybe he could talk to us a little bit about it, if that's all right. Sure. Thanks.
Well, just in the way of a little bit of background, and I realize that the change like this can be uncomfortable because we've made important strides in this area over the last 6 years, and I think the last thing that any one of us wants to do is to relax some standards that are working well for us and put horses at risk. But I just quickly to summarize that there are many risk factors that contribute to fatalities in horse racing, and that the risk for injury can be mitigated by protective factors. So there's risk factors and there's protective factors that are in play. One of the claiming rule purse to price ratio at 2 that we set up in 2012 was an emergency measure to address a specific situation at Aqueduct Racetrack where there were purse to claim ratios of up to 4 times the value, and it really was a tough situation there. So we did some things that worked out pretty well, along with a number of other recommendations. But I think that I like this language that we've talked about this for quite some time. I was very uncomfortable with a fixed increase to say, well, now we're going to increase the allowable purse to claim ratio to 2.7 or 2.8. I just didn't strike me as a real comfortable situation. But the idea that we can have a case-by-case basis evaluation and racetrack-to-racetrack evaluation made me more comfortable with this. Also, the fact that we have some new protective factors in place. I've always thought that if we're going to take away one protective factor, what have we got to take the place? And what are we going to put back in there that's going to protect these horses? And something that we've been very successful with in the past couple of years is a program that I'm running in conjunction with the Jockey Club, where we use Jockey Club information to get a list of horses that meet certain criteria that might put them at increased risk of injury. And then we get these horses on a list. We then interview the trainers. We go actually look at the horses in an out-of-competition format. We call it out-of-competition scrutiny. In addition to looking at the horses on race day, out of competition, we're examining all these horses. We're getting the history on them. We're finding out why didn't you race until you were 4 years old? Why haven't you been racing in the last 6 months? And we get a real detailed history about these horses. And then we can make a very good informed decision about should they be racing right now or should they not. And so it's that level of out-of-competition scrutiny in conjunction with the other things that we're doing and the flexibility of this rule to evaluate it on a case-by-case basis and to make changes as we go along. So it's a constant real-time evaluation and adjustment capability that makes me believe that we can put this amendment in place without making a significant increase in risk for the horses.
So I'm not sure I'm using the right language, but are you saying that someone, I don't know who, someone will be taking a clinical history of each horse before each claiming race?
No. What it is, we have a list of horses that meet certain criteria that are scientific valid criteria for risk. And so every one of those horses is examined, that's right, by a veterinarian, a regulatory veterinarian, and we get a history from the trainer about his life history, like how did he get here?
Before each claiming race or one time?
No, one time, and then that horse is on a list then. We call them horses of interest. And that's a special list where we keep an eye on those horses as time goes on. So we follow them, along in the racing program. So it's not every horse. Risk is not equally distributed across the whole population. And the key here is really identifying horses that are at increased risk and paying special attention to them to make sure they're okay.
So if I understand it correctly, the implication of what you're saying is that the general rule proves too much. It captures too many horses and keeps them from running and claiming races that perhaps on a clinical basis you might conclude they could run in.
That's right.
The flip side is experience may eventually show us that the clinical approach isn't generally applicable enough, and we end up having an increase in mortality rate on the track. And we won't know, I assume, until we have some experience.
Well, this rule only applies to a certain class of race, open claiming races. And so, as we say in the proposal here, that racetracks will have to meet certain criteria to apply for this adjustment, a modest adjustment. Let's say we go up to 2.4 or 2.7 from 2. In order to do that, they're going to have to demonstrate that they have procedures in place to protect the horses. And, that's going to be one of the criteria to allow that. And if we find, for example, that in a portion of the meet that the fatality rate's going up, we can stop it.
Do you look at each fatality to see which risk factors may have been involved?
Absolutely. We investigate every fatality with that in mind.
This is a rule proposal?
Yes.
And what are we expecting? We have a comment period?
We'll have a 60-day comment period. So, Doctor, you were kind enough to send us a memo, I think, a while back,
few weeks, I think, just kind of outlining the success that we've had in reducing fatalities. And in the list, the claims to purse ratio was in there. And I don't think they were in order of importance, but it was one of many, and there were many lists there. So my question, I guess, is there a basis for saying that that's one of the things that has been in effect that has made the fatality rate go down? I mean, is there any empirical evidence of that?
We can't, because it's a multifactorial problem, we can't isolate a single factor and say that this is the key. You know, some things are probably more important than others, but there's no science to establish that. It's one of the factors that's been important.
I think we, at least for myself, and maybe I speak for others, I'm not sure, but we would like some kind of comfort level with, okay, we're going to, if we make this change, because we did really, really well in Saratoga this year, right? The fatalities were way down. I think that was a very successful thing. But if we're going to do this, as Commissioner Snyder said, you know, we don't want them to start all of a sudden ticking back up.
Right.
It's just not acceptable to us, right? I mean,
Of course.
and I know that you put a lot of emphasis on this. So I guess we're looking for some assurance that, you know, we're not going to reverse the trend that we've set here, and it's a very positive trend.
I think that, and believe me, I studied this carefully because I'm on the line for this.
Sure.
You know, and that's my job, is to make sure that doesn't happen.
Well, we're going to take your counsel, right? We're going to take your suggestions on it.
Wait, can you go back in time a little bit? Why did we implement this rule in the first place? It was related to an increase in fatalities, right?
Exactly.
So now we're saying it's a little more flexible, so we anticipate less, or we're
We're
deeper?
saying that circumstances are different than they were in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
In 2012, there was an enormous influx of money into the purse structure at Aqueduct. And the claiming a $10,000 horse could be running for $40,000
Right,
purses.
yeah.
And that was way inappropriate. And it completely distorted the normal level of risk aversion that one would have for entering horses. What we're talking about here is a very modest change, not 4 times. We're talking maybe go to 2, right now it's at 2, maybe we go to 2.4 for certain races. There are really only 2 classes of races that NYR has requested to make these changes in. And I believe that, and also I would say to you that at that time, there was no scientific evidence, and I chaired the commission that made that recommendation. We had no scientific evidence to really prove that the 4 times purse claiming ratio is more dangerous than the 2, but it seemed intuitive. We had to do something, and we did a lot of things in a hurry because we had to stop that situation. So it was one of 38 different recommendations that we put in place. So again, I think that right now, we have in place right now what I like to think of as a ongoing quality control program, where every single fatality is investigated, every single month we look at fatalities, every single meet we measure fatalities, and we do real-time assessment and interventions. And so if things start to go up, as they did in 2017 in particular, in the first week of that meet in 2017, we started doing work on the problem. And we got it fixed, but it took a week or 2 to get that part of it squared away. And then we used all that information to design the interventions for 2018, and it was spectacular. Now, I think that the key here is that we continue that ongoing quality control process, and if there's any indication that we're making a bad move here, you know, everything here I think is very legitimate, it's well thought out, it's appropriate in its limited scope, and it provides flexibility to stop it if it's a problem. I wouldn't endorse it under any other circumstances.
So with regard to the flexibility that you're referring to,
Right.
Does the proposed rule, I don't know who would have their answer to this, does the proposed rule indicate that in the event that we see a statistically significant ticking up of mortality rates, that we can reimpose the rule as is?
So the text of the rule, as the amendment is structured, is that the track would request a relaxation of the general rule, and each of those requests is evaluated individually. So if it's a request that goes beyond a threshold that Dr. Palmer or others who are analyzing it would deem acceptable, that particular request would be denied.
Right, so the underlying rule actually doesn't change.
Yeah, well, the underlying rule would
would still be 50% or 2 times.
Yeah, yes, but then the actual rule will say, unless the commission approves a request after evaluation, after considering the competitiveness, soundness, and safety of the horses.
That request would come to us.
It would come to the commission in general.
Yes.
And is that time sensitive, the request?
Are we going to be getting frequent, what's the frequency exactly? What's the frequency of the reporting that we're going to be getting on this?
Well, I imagine, you can get reporting on how it's all turning out as you direct staff to give to you, but I would imagine that the day-to-day administration of this will be done at the staff level under your delegation to staff.
Well, my question was different. Someone puts in a request, is it for a period of time, for a meet, for a year, or is it in place just in response to the initial request? Or do they have to get it renewed after an 18-month period, 6-month period, or how does the...
There would be no hard and fast, so they would make a proposal
So it's
saying...
not time sensitive, is
Yeah,
what you're
they
saying?
might say, I want to have this type of rule for this level of price in a race for the Belmont meet, or
So
something like
that was my question.
So, and if that's appropriate, then the horse racing division and the experts would analyze that and say, yes, that's appropriate, or if they say, no, it should be for a shorter time period, they would make an adjustment for
I
a
would ask,
particular
Mr.
race.
Chairman, I think the sensitivity of the commissioners is clear on this issue. We're pleased with the success that we've had, and we're not in a hurry to give up that success. So I just want to make sure that we take whatever steps are necessary so that the rule does not make it impossible for us to watch this very closely and to catch it if it starts going in the wrong direction.
So put a time lapse on it. Only approve it for a year.
It's less than that. We wouldn't approve it for a year, I can tell you that right now.
Okay.
It would be approved for a limited, maybe.
What's the
maybe-
proposal?
Yeah, the proposal is there a time limit in the proposed rule?
I don't.
I didn't see one.
Specified in the rule, no.
There's not.
No.
There's no sunset clause.
That was my question.
Let them come back. They have to come back at that point.
And if you're saying that you wouldn't,
A year
What-
is too long.
yeah,
Okay. It
so
has to
do
be
we
real-time
want to
evaluation.
put a time period in the rule? And if so, what's your guidance on what that should be?
I certainly think it should be no longer than a meet, any given meet. You know, it would be one meet at a time, because things can change, and the risk at the meets are a little different.
So Aqueduct's coming up?
Yeah.
Do it for Aqueduct?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
the intent was that it certainly would be, the next request is undoubtedly going to be for Aqueduct, because that meet's coming up.
Yeah.
And then, and I would not approve anything that lasted more than that meet, you know, and I think we just watch it carefully and see what happens. And even so, we can make appropriate adjustments, like we've done before in the past at Aqueduct. We had a bump in the road in 2014. We convened the horses, we tracked people, we made some changes right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
No race.
Scott? This is Rick Adele. The rule as drafted does minimize the permission for all or a portion of a race meet. And I think that you have, I'm sorry, Ron.
No, I was going to say that too, it says right in there.
Yeah.
Says what? I'm not clear.
It says, unless the commission approves a request from a franchise or licensed corporation conducting thoroughbred racing for a lower minimum price for all or a portion of a race meeting.
Okay, so it's specific to a meet, is what you're saying, at most. Is that, am I understanding correctly? or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing is that I think that we're permission granted, that Dr. Palmer would still be monitoring the effects, and so that every grant of permission would be conditioned on his continual oversight of it, so that we wouldn't be committed to allowing them to continue to go forward if there were a serious problem.
Okay, so at most it's up to a meet, but you could set it less than that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're making a proposed rule for comment. Would this type of flexibility be available during the comment period?
No.
So it only becomes available
When the rule is,
at least 60 days from now?
when you adopt
The rule.
formally after the expiration of the
60.
comment period.
Okay?
All right, we'll see who we hear from.
Any other questions or comment?
Uh-uh.
Thank you a great deal, Doc, for your
Thank you.
guidance and leadership and keeping on top of the issue for us. We haven't revisited the level of fatalities we had in the past. And we thank you a great deal.
Thank you.
So I think we need a motion to approve the proposed rule?
Yep. Do we have a motion on the rule?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Okay. The motion passes. Ron?
Pick 6 jackpot pools. For commission considerations is a proposed new thoroughbred wager to be known as the Pick 6 jackpot wager. This rulemaking would authorize New York thoroughbred tracks to offer a wager that is offered in several other jurisdictions. The wager, also known as jackpot or rainbow wager, appeals to bettors by giving a larger jackpot when there is only one winning wager from a pool. If there are more than one winning ticket, then the major portion of the day's pool is paid out to those who selected 6 of 6 winners, and the minor pool is added to the carryover. The carryover gets paid out when there is a unique winning ticket or when there is an intermediate or final distribution as approved by the commission, which would typically occur at the end of a race meeting. I would like to specifically thank staff from the New York Racing Association for assisting with language development. Staff recommends that the commission authorize the proposal of this rulemaking.
Any questions on the proposed rule? May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Motion carries. Adjudications? The next item, scheduled business regards adjudications. Today we have 2 items for adjudication. Ron?
In the matter of Thomas E. Russell, on January 10, 2018, the Bureau of Licensing denied the application of Thomas E. Russell for a non-gaming employee registration as a housekeeping shift manager at Resorts World Catskill, citing New York Racing Pari-Mutuel Wagering and Breeding Law, Section 1318(1)(c), which provides for disqualification on the grounds of the conviction of the applicant of any offense in any jurisdiction which is or would be a felony or other crime involving public integrity, embezzlement, theft, fraud, or perjury. Mr. Russell requested a hearing which was conducted on June 19, 2018. The hearing officer submitted a report dated August 2, 2018, which recommended that the registration denial be upheld. The commission considered this matter at a meeting conducted pursuant to the judicial quasi-judicial proceedings exemption of New York Public Officers Law, Section 108.1.
The commission duly deliberated and considered this matter and determined upon a 6-0 vote to sustain with technical modifications in language the hearing officer's report and recommendations. Next case.
In the matter of Terry Santiago, on January 19, 2018, the Bureau of Licensing denied the application of Terry Santiago for a non-gaming employee registration as an environmental services attendant at Resorts World Catskill, citing New York Racing Pari-Mutuel Wagering Breeding Law, Section 1318(1), which provides for disqualification on the grounds of a failure of the applicant to prove by clear and convincing evidence that the applicant is qualified in accordance with the provisions of this article. B, failure of the applicant to provide information, documentation, and assurances required by this article or requested by the commission, or failure of the applicant to reveal any fact material to qualification, or the supplying of information which is untrue or misleading as to a material fact pertaining to the qualification criteria. C, the conviction of the applicant of any offense in any jurisdiction which is or would be a felony or other crime involving public integrity, embezzlement, theft, fraud, or perjury. Mr. Santiago requested a hearing which was conducted on May 24, 2018. The hearing officer submitted a report dated July 5, 2018, which recommended that the registration denial be upheld. The commission considered this matter at a meeting conducted pursuant to judicial or quasi-judicial proceedings exemption of New York Public Officers Law, Section 108.1.
The commission duly deliberated and considered this matter and determined upon a 6-0 vote to sustain the hearing officer's report and recommendations. The next order of business is old business. Does anyone have any old business? Hearing none, next issue is new business. Does anyone have any new business to discuss? No? Following that, the next issue is scheduling our next meeting, and Kristen will be in touch with all of us to confirm a date for our next meeting, but at the moment, we've identified a tentative date of October 22nd, so if everybody can check their calendars to see if that's doable for them and get back to Kristen would be greatly appreciated. Anything else? With that, that concludes today's published agenda.